would obviously have observed by now that I have been suspended from Parliament for the next 7 working days. Now, interestingly, the Speaker has decided to suspend me. Of course, her statement is that her hands are tied. Obviously, no one knows as to who has tied her hands, but obviously, she's put in a corner to a point where she's decided to send me out of the House. For those of you who may be interested to understand why I've been sent out of the House, you wish to know that as of yesterday, the Minister of Finance brought an item into Parliament, namely that he wanted to have Parliament to approve a supplementary budget. So for those of you who may want to understand, so last year in 2024, we did approve the national budget for 2025, which stood at 217 billion kwacha. Now, midway this year, the Minister of Finance has come back to Parliament to ask that we add an addition to that supplementary budget to a tune of 33.6 billion kwacha. Now, out of that 33.6 billion kwacha, part of that component is going to be borrowed, okay? It means that the Minister of Finance is asking that we borrow 14.8 billion kwacha commercially. Now, for those of you who understand commercially, it means that we are going to go to commercial banks. And in this case, we are borrowing those funds locally. Interestingly, we are borrowing at 13.5%. Now, if you put together, because the law of this land says when government wants to borrow, they must come to Parliament to ask for Parliament to approve that borrowing. So for the 2025 national budget, the minister asked Parliament to borrow 15.5 billion kwacha. Today, he has come back to Parliament that we borrow 14.8 billion kwacha. Now, added together, we are borrowing 30.6 billion kwacha towards the 2025 national budget. Now, for those who want to again understand further, 30.5 billion kwacha means we are borrowing $1.27 billion. So you can imagine this country is contracting a debt per annum of $1.27 billion. Now, this is not the issue. The issue with our friends in the UPND today is that yesterday, I wondered, why is it that the Minister of Finance is all interested in borrowing instead of us harnessing natural resources? Of course, there was a controversial issue, around which the Minister of Infrastructure raised a point of order in which I suggested, could it be that there are people who are getting commissions out of this borrowing? Now, today when we were discussing this item, I was on the floor, and in the borrowing plan, so these items you must clearly mark out. Today, the minister wants to borrow 14.8 billion kwacha, and that is going to be at 7% commercial interest terms, all right? As opposed to them borrowing concessionally, as they promised many years ago that they will not be contracting, expensive money. They have decided to go to commercial banks at 7%, all right, without any grace period, meaning that repayment can even start tomorrow. Now, further to that, the plan also provides that there is going to be a handling fee of not more than 1%. So in my submission, what seems not to have settled very well with my friends on the opposite side is that I mentioned that, you remember yesterday, you censured me on the issue of commissions. And here I am reading a report, and there's a statement to suggest that there's going to be a handling fee of 1%. I did not accuse anybody of getting a commission, but those of you who understand, when you say handling fee, a handling fee is a commission. So somewhere, somehow, somebody is getting a 1% handling fee. It could be the bank, or God knows who could be getting that 1% handling fee. Now, this is where I have a problem myself, and I keep wondering, why are we going to be borrowing $1.27 billion in one fiscal year when we have got resources, when we have other minerals where we could fall back on? So could it be that this insatiable appetite to continue borrowing away from concessional terms to commercial terms be necessitated because there is something called a handling fee? Now, this is apparently what has not sat down well with our friends on the opposite side, and they raised points of order. The speaker ruled that I was out of order. From nowhere, I was being censured to a point where I'm being sent out of Parliament. For me, I don't have a problem being sent out of Parliament. I can be sent out of Parliament even for a whole year. But that does not stop me from questioning the decisions and indecisions of government. And I'm basically doing my job. If the people of Zambia will feel that I'm overdoing it, I am very available to stop. I can stop questioning this government, but I think that I've got a duty to continue to question the decisions and indecisions of government, in which case, for me, I am questioning, why does the UPND government, who were elected on the premise that they will do away with borrowing, today they are borrowing $1.2 billion in one fiscal year? And that is not concessional terms. They are borrowing commercially. And if a government borrows from the local bank, it means you are crowding out the credit that must be available, the finances that must be available for private sector growth. It means that the private sector wants to go to the bank to borrow, will find no money. And even if they're going to find a little money, it will be very expensive money. This is a government on one hand that wants to promote growth of the private sector, growth of the economy on the other hand, stifling the growth of that sector by pulling out all the resources, taking it into these borrowings. So I leave it up to you, the citizens, to judge. If I want to repeat, if I'm being excessive by holding this government accountable, I'm very free to keep quiet in Parliament. But if you believe that I must continue to pursue this government, to ask them questions over their decision and indecision, then I am your friend. I'm going to continue doing my job. That's all I wanted to inform you, dear friends.
Thank you. Thank you very much.